Hi everyone, Mike here from Watch It Paint It. Some of you may have seen this video on my old channel, but I want to continue my Tainted Grail painting series here, so I brought this video over. For those of you who haven't seen it, I hope you enjoy it. After scraping off the most obvious mold lines, I'm then filling in some of the gaps. These gaps are very narrow, so I'm going to take the easy route and just fill them in with a thick matte varnish. Liquitex matte varnish is really good for this. Now, you can certainly leave your base as it is, since it already has some texture to it, but I always like to add a bit of dirt, so I'm going to be using Dark Earth from Vallejo. And while that's still wet, I'm going to add a bit of sand and rock to it as well. Then, once that's all completely hardened, I'm spraying the entire thing with a black primer. I'm going to break this armor up into two different main colors. For all of the filigreed armor, I'm going to be using a dark bronze color. I'm also painting the faceplate with this color. For the ornamental belt, I'm going to be using Tainted Gold from Army Painter. If you don't have this color, you can just mix half and half gold and silver and you'll get something very similar. For the rest of the armor, I'll be using a 50-50 mix of Abaddon Black and Gunmetal. I'm also going to be using this color on the blades of the weapons. For the metal parts of the weapons that aren't sharp edges, I'm using Rough Iron from Army Painter, but this is very similar to the Warplock Bronze that I used on the armor, so either one will do. Next I'm putting a wash over the armor, and for this I'll be using a 50-50 mix of Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade. Now I want to bring back some of that shine and to do some highlights. On the bronze-colored armor, I'll be using Runelord Brass. If you don't have a light bronze or brass color, just add some silver to the original metal color you used on the armor. All I'm doing here is trying to pick out the filigree and raised edges of the armor. No need to get heavy with this dry brush. For all of the silver-colored metal, as well as the ornaments and the weapons, I'll be using Shining Silver and doing the same thing, just a light dry brush over all of the edges. For the cloak, I'll be using three different colors. The first is going to be a 2-to-1 mix of Deathworld Forest and Abaddon Black. This is going to be the shadow color for the cloak. I'm also painting the bits of fabric hanging down from the Fore-Dweller's waist. Once I have a good solid color on there, I'm going to stipple on the highlights. The first highlight is pure Deathworld Forest, and this is going over most of the cloak. I'm just avoiding the deep folds. I'm stippling this part to try to create a weathered look. On the top of the folds, I'm adding multiple layers of this color to brighten it even further. Next I want to deepen the shadows, so I'm going back to the dark cloak color, adding a bit more black, and then dabbing this under the folds. For the final highlight color, I'm using some watered down Ogryn Camo, and I'm stippling this onto the very top surface of each fold. After this, I'll go back with the other cloak colors and do one more pass with each just to help them blend together better. The last thing I'm doing with the cloak is using a slightly thinned down wash of Athonian Camoshade. You could also use a brown wash if you don't have this one. For all the remaining fabric and leather on the model, I'm using Steel Legion Drab. This is the pants and the boots, the leather straps, and unarmored parts of the arms. The legs also have ropes tied around different parts of them, so for the rope, I know that I'm going to be using a brown wash on the boots and legs, so I'm going to go ahead and paint the ground now, since it's going to need a brown wash as well. For the ground, I'm using a watered down dark brown. This one is Dryad bark. I'm also going to stipple some of this dark brown onto the bottom of the cloak. Next, I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade over all of the areas of the model that were just painted brown or tan, including the dirt. After that, I'm dry brushing all of the dirt with XV88, and then I'm going to be dry brushing the rocks with first Mechanicus Standard Gray and then Celestra Gray. Next, I'm going to paint the lantern. If you want to save yourself some time, you can just leave the windows of the lantern completely black so it looks like it's not lit. You can already see what that looks like here. I'm going to paint mine to look lit, so to do that I'm first base coating the windows and the inside of the window frames with white. Now I'm going to mix up a bunch of different colors for the inside of the lantern. The first color is going to be white with a bit of bright yellow, the second is going to be a pure bright yellow, then yellow with orange, pure orange, and then orange with a bit of black. I'm starting off with the lightest color, and I'm covering all of the white paint with this light yellow. I've thinned down all of the paints with equal amounts of water to make them into glazes. Next, I'm switching to the pure yellow, and I'm adding this to the top 75% of the lit area in the lantern, including the frames around the lantern windows. Now I've switched to the light orange, and I'm adding this to the top 50% or so of the lit area. So you can see the pattern here. Every time I switch to a darker color, I'm painting a smaller part of the lit area, always moving my brush away from the brightest part of the lantern. I'm also adding multiple layers of each color and adjusting the size of the lighter and darker areas slightly as I go. Now moving on to the darkest orange for the top 25% or so, and then I'll use some of the orange-black mix for the very top of the lantern. Once I'm happy with the glow on the lantern, I'm switching to pure black and putting a black edge back onto all of the outermost part of the lantern frame. Next, I want to add a little bit of object source lighting to the leg and the weapon. I'm starting off by reapplying the Steel Legion Drab to the fabric nearest the lantern. After that, I'm adding a bit of Ivory into the Steel Legion Drab and using this to increase the brightness at the closest points between the fabric and the lantern. I'm also dabbing some pure ivory onto the ropes where they are closest to the lantern. Now I'm switching to the light orange color, the mix of yellow and orange, and I'm brushing this onto the areas that were just highlighted. Make sure the paint is very watered down for this. You want to slowly build up the color with multiple thin layers. Next, I'll add a small amount of the pure yellow just at the center of each lit up area to make them look brighter. Finally, I'm going in with a black wash and making sure the shadows directly opposite the light are good and dark. You can also do something similar on the sword. I'm using Shining Silver on the back third of the sharpened edge, Abaddon Black on the front third, and a 50-50 mix in the middle. Then I'm adding a few layers of the orange-yellow color to the blade and some of the raised filigree. At this point it feels like your eye is constantly drawn to the lantern, so I want to change that a bit by adding some bright gold highlights just around where the eyes would be on this helmet. The last bit of color I'm using before I seal this model with varnish will be some dark gray. I'm using German Grey to paint the rim of the base, and then I'm using it on the raised part of the leather on the polearm. And once this paint dries, I'm spraying the whole thing with matte varnish. The final thing I want to do before I call this finished is to add some grass and moss to the ground. I'm mixing some PVA glue with a bit of water, and then I'm adding a few different types of flock. The goal is just to make it look like this guy is standing in a turfy field. And there you have it, the Fore-Dweller from Tainted Grail. Thank you very much to all of the patrons that supported my channel at the time this video was made, and welcome to newest patron Andrew Gaskin. If you have any comments, questions, or requests, feel free to leave them in the comments section below, and thanks for watching.